people, or rather good evening. I will say good evening to the one person I have on the live stream at this moment, and the more that are sure to join. And grateful that I'm at a point where I can actually start a live stream and have a chat going with people. For anyone watching this later, you may notice that the title is just Open Forum. And this is because I originally had a title, something about the world and life, and I thought, no. I'm just going to make this strictly an open forum, because by the time I get finished having a discussion, I always end up talking about pretty much 20 different subjects. And I never run out of ideas because my brain won't stop. It just won't stop. It's 24/7. Go, go, go. The moment I wake up in the morning, I'm thinking about all the stuff I need to get done and processing what I'm going to do during the day. And in the back of my mind, I'm always thinking about topics for videos and things I want to talk about. And then I start to ask myself, why exactly do you even want to talk about them? And these ideas go over and over in my head. And tonight I was considering how making YouTube videos, for example, is a parasocial relationship. And that's not an offensive term. It's not like parasitic. It's parasocial, meaning that it's a one-way relationship where everyone who watches my channel sees me talking and they hear the things that I say. Whether you agree, disagree, none of that matters. What matters is that you have an idea of who you think I am. And I have no idea who you are. And I want to make it clear that I do try to understand my subs and connect their names. My herb business, I'd have people ordering herbs and be like, oh yeah, I go by this screen name, and half the time I misread the screen names. So it becomes kind of interesting to run a channel and try to make it the type of channel I want it to be, which is where I'm interacting with you folks. And that's why I call it Open Forum, because I don't think I'd have any enjoyment doing a live cast if I had one of those sidebars that was just constantly flooded with one-liners and people consistently trying to stand out in the crowd just to talk to each other and scream at each other and start fights. I feel like this is a place, not going to say safe space because nothing's safe, but it's safe because the people who interact here respect one another, and I appreciate all of you for that. And I just wanted to say that first, to get that out of the way. I'm making this a live cast as well as a podcast, which will be uploaded to my podcast station. By the way, I just uploaded 3 new podcasts, and those are on the 15-minute Free Thinking podcast site, and I'm hoping to upload another few that I have. So I just want to say hello to everyone. Hello to Script Making and to Chris. Hello to Forest Fern. Hello to Eric. And hello, Sandra. Hello from Texas. Nice. So, good to see you all. Thanks for coming. I wanted to start off this live discussion, and I want to make this clear first that this is open forum. You're welcome to steer the conversation any direction you feel is appropriate. And I would really like to, because I don't sit here to hear my own voice. I love to discuss things, but I always feel awkward even talking about these topics. A good one would be something that I made a video about earlier. I'll give you a sneak peek because I haven't uploaded this one, but it's a topic that really got me thinking. Okay, I'm sure that all of you out there have had somebody in your life tell you that you're either an introvert or an extrovert or extravert, depending on which pronunciation and time period you speak it in. And these aren't modern terms. These may sound like something that people just came up with in modern psychology. These terms go way back. But introvert and extrovert, to get to the etymology and the root of the words, okay, so the vert comes from valent, which means strength in Latin. And, sorry, no, I was doing that for ambivalent. I got too far ahead of myself. When you're ambivalent about something, it means you see things two ways. You can't decide. The ambi part of it is in two ways is what it means. Ambi means in two ways. So when you're ambivalent, then you have strength in two different ways. So back to the introvert extrovert, and I'll tell you why the ambivalent mattered, because ambivalent is very similar to, of course, the term ambivert. Ambivert. Ask yourself, have you ever heard the term ambivert before? And if you have, then congratulations, you got me beat, because I just heard this the other day. I'd never heard this term in my life. Of all the times I've heard introvert and extrovert, nobody's ever used the term ambivert. So, introvert means to look within, right? So the intro is the intro, the enter within, and the vert is to see or to look. So it's to look within, just like extrovert is to look outward. But ambivert, amba meaning, as we said, in two ways, an ambivert is someone who can be sometimes introverted, sometimes extroverted, depending on the circumstance. And I'm guessing that 99% of you out there fall into this category. And this is important because in this black and white society that we have right now, where everything has to be here or there, it can't be anywhere in between. There is no room for gray areas. And I better turn my phone down. I didn't know I had my volume up. Hold on a second. I hate it when it does that. There we go. Where was I? So yeah, we're always told that, well, these people are introverted and they tend to sit by themselves and they like to isolate. And this guy over here, he's extroverted. He loves to go to parties. And the quickest way I could think of to define this was to say, okay, I'm guaranteeing that all of you, sorry about this, I had to plug it back in. All of you out there, if you're hanging out with your best friends and you're drinking, you're probably an extrovert. And if you're in a brand new town you've never been in or starting a new job, you're probably an introvert. This is because it's circumstantial depending on where we're at. But bigger than this, it's the fact that I'd never heard the term. Because people are so desperate to classify people into categories that ambivert isn't even something people want to think about, because it means that you can't decide or something. Think about being ambivalent about something. It's strength. As I said earlier, valent is strength, valence, and ambi being in two ways, it's having strength in two ways. It doesn't even mean you can't decide. It means that you have strength. And this strength is something I think should be taken as literal strength, at least literal mental strength. Because we are stuck in a deep rut of dichotomous thinking and having to see things in black and white. There's a very polarized mindset that we carry around with us these days. It's seen not just in introvert extrovert, right? That's just my metaphor for the larger, or my allegory rather for the larger problem. You're either a Democrat or you're a Republican. You're either a Christian or you're an atheist. You're either this or you're that. And people are so desperate to classify each other. We even get to the point where we create personality types. Are you an INFJ or an ENFG? Whatever. I've looked into these personality quizzes and tests, and yes, there's something to be said about the unique personalities we each have. But when you get to the point of trying to define it on paper, that becomes more difficult. And I feel the same way about, introverts. All of us have the potential to be introverted. I'm the kind of person who needs to go out here into my office back here, and I need to recover. When there's too much noise, when there's too much chaos going on in life, I need to just hide out for a while. Even in my car these days, I find myself not listening to my car stereo very often. I used to crank up the tunes. But I really love my quiet time. And it's probably because I don't have as much as I used to have. Of course, that's by choice. I mean, it's not like my life is completely hectic, and that's not really the point here. But rather that I'm doing the best with what I've got. And I found that sometimes I'm very outgoing, sometimes I'm totally withdrawn. And in fact, I can go from being withdrawn to being completely outgoing in a matter of like 5 minutes, hang out with the right group of people, get to talking, maybe have a couple beers. Especially if I take some acid, don't get me started, man. I'll just ramble on all night about stuff. So I wanted to bring that up to make the point that if you haven't heard of the term ambivert, you might want to ask yourself why. And it's along the same lines of how most Americans who are, let's say, of one political persuasion or the other, you might not know that. Do you know what the largest, group of voters is? Is it Republicans or is it Democrats? It's neither. It's independent voters. Independent voters make 40 something percent of the voting population. And of those, of course, most people lean or favor one direction or the other. But people are a lot more flexible than we give each other credit for. And I've seen this firsthand in myself and others, how quickly we can change ideas when we're given new information if we are open to those ideas. And I think this is the crucial point here. We have to be open. I've heard so many people in my life growing up say that people don't change. And I actually had it in my mind that people really, yeah, people are stubborn. And the older you get, the more you get stuck in your way of thinking. That's true for a lot of people, but that's not true for everybody. Most people are independent thinkers. They just kind of go along with the discussion or the group because they don't want to make waves. But with stupidity on the rise, we have to definitely have discussions about these things. So, um, hello to Dan Frank. It's good to see you, my friend. He says he remembers seeing a video of mine where I talked about esoteric or sacred geometry like that. I'm another random YouTuber, the mystery. Nice. Well, I'll get into that in a second. Hello, Ryan. It's good to see you. Eric, all right. And hello, Smoking Mantis. Hello, all, he says. Good to see you, my friend. And so welcome to any of the newcomers here. And as I've been saying here, this was kind of a discussion, an open forum. Anybody's welcome to lead the discussion. Somebody just mentioned that they started watching my channel back when I was doing esoteric videos and, excuse me, sacred geometry, things like that. I want to make a note on that. This is a topic, the occult, if you will, the hidden stuff, a subject that I delved into quite deeply for quite some time. I've got Manly P. Hall books and moved on, and of course even down to just Alan Watts, the kind of surface Zen. I've gone back and forth between deep, complex ideas and very simple life ideas, right? And what I came to the conclusion when I was studying all of these hidden mysteries is that not all of them are hidden. And it was interesting because I was always told when I was learning these things decades ago that, these things had been hidden from the people. And once the people figure out the true power they have, then they'll take back their power and their personal truth. But what I find is people are lazy. They don't want to. Even if people were told that, hey, if you meditate for 2 hours every day, then you can achieve some sort of enlightenment. Most people wouldn't care, even if it was proven by science, right? They don't want to take the time to do things. Most people are lazy. That's not a jab, because I'm one of them. I am one of the people. I am one of the guys who will sit on my couch and watch a documentary instead of doing something else. But on this particular topic of the occult and hidden knowledge, I want to make it clear that you need to get your hands wet. I mean, you've really got, I guess, get your feet wet, get your hands dirty, right? You need to get in there and read the books and really pull yourself into the text and the discussions. And you can gain a lot of insight through many of these archetypes, allegories, and ancient stories. My study of the occult and, the supernatural, all those different things really brought me closer to understanding religion. Not close enough to believe in somebody else's version of God, but to understand why people believe what they believe and how people need that in their lives. And I'll tell you, I kind of walked away realizing that most of it was pointless. But there is one thing when it comes to sacred geometry, as you mentioned. If you're not familiar with sacred geometry, you may be familiar with the flower of life, several concentric interlocking circles. I, if you take a compass, piece of paper, and you draw a circle, then you run that compass to the edge of that circle and draw another circle inside that circle. Then you run that compass to where those two circles meet and draw another circle. Continue this process, and you will end up with the flower of life. And it's a lot of the things that I hear about the ancient occult and mysticism is really pretty hokey. I mean, but there is a lot of truth to some of this stuff, and you won't see it unless you draw it. I would highly recommend everybody to get a giant sheet of paper and sit down with the compass, draw concentric circles like this, and then start connecting the dots. Literally, you'll see the Star of David comes from there, many different religious symbols, and there are some underlying patterns behind all of these things. But what fascinates me is that no humans have really been able to grasp that. It's kind of like when people say, look, you can see the Fibonacci sequence in nature, and look at this ratio in a sunflower. It's also in a nautilus shell and all these other things and spiral galaxies, as above, so below. And you say, yeah, so what? They say, well, it's proof that there's something bigger. You say, yeah, so that's about as far as you can take it. Ultimately, what we're looking to do in our lives is to grasp something from the air that we can use ourselves. It's one thing to know stuff. It's another thing to know things that actually benefit us or help us. And ultimately, we're all looking to better ourselves. Well, or at least be happier. And this brings me to my second part of this discussion, something that I really wanted to talk about too. There's a few channels I watch that talk about socialism. There's like More Perfect Union and a couple others that I used to really find interesting until I just started, over the years, cringing more and more at the claims that are made about, basically, I'm not going to get into the socialism capitalism debate, but what I'm saying here is that for all the people saying, it seems like this big argument. The whole video I watched was talking about how those who say that socialism didn't work are totally full of it. And instead of touching on the actual way to benefit our society, it was talking about how the other guys are wrong. This seems to be like an ongoing theme between belief systems. It's not about figuring out what works for you and just sticking with it. It's always pointing the finger at the other guys and saying, no, you're wrong. Neither of you coming to terms with the fact that here we are in the same reality. But one of the topics that often comes up about humans is that we are kind, that we are generous, and that we help each other. There's nothing more impressive to us as humans than when there's a huge explosion on the freeway and a truck and somebody runs up and parks their car and runs the trucker out, right? At the risk of their own life. Or somebody who jumps in to save somebody who's being attacked by an alligator. These things happen all the time. It's altruism is what we would define it as, risking yourself for the others or doing things without expecting anything in return. Now, one could argue that we do get something in return. We get a feeling of righteousness and doing the right thing. That's not it. That's not, I mean, there is some programming, but animals help each other out. I mean, it seems that in nature, it's part of the natural process to help one another to some extent. So I thought about when there's a major disaster, say there's a hurricane or, a flood or something. You'll see these news clips of people helping each other out. People who maybe weren't even affected by the flood, or maybe people who lost their own house in the tornado and they were managed to survive in their storm shelter, and they come out to their house being gone. The first thing they do is run next door and start helping other people get out of the debris. This is what we love as humans, this celebration of strength and assistance and helping one another, because altruism is ultimately something that we revere and respect, whether we like admit it or not. But I thought about, at what point do we not help others? Because there is a point. And I thought, okay, so when people help everyone else out, it's because they know that they're going to rebuild and that we're able to rebuild. And this, follow me here, because I haven't really thought this through here, but we're more likely to help others when it's our own local community and we know that we have to rebuild anyway. It's part of the process. But let's say something happened that was so devastating that there was no coming back from it. Talk about a nuclear war, or some sort of a major upheaval, or worldwide earthquakes, solar flare that takes out the grid. Let's say that we're all really hating it and the population is at serious risk, which I believe will probably happen eventually. It has to. I mean, there's no way that at some point in the future something's not going to happen on the earth that's going to cull the herd, right? When we watch apocalypse movies, they always make it seem like the first thing that's going to happen, and we're talking within 5 hours of the power going out, all of a sudden there's looters on the side of the road with machine guns and pickups holding up everybody who passes by. That's not reality. I mean, most Americans own a firearm, and it's not like people are just going to, people are going to be taking care of their own shit if something big happens. But I think people are more likely to help others than anything. And I think that people who have lost in their life, lost people, had losses in their lives, are even often more likely to help others. You would think that people would have less, I mean, you'll have empathy, of course, and sympathy for people, but it's like, oh, well, toughen up, I've been through that. No, people are more likely because they've been through it themselves and they understand it. And this, my friends, is one of the most crucial things I think we need to understand right now, is because if we can't put ourselves in somebody else's shoes, then we have no clue, their intentions or what kind of a person they are. We base each other on, who you voted for. I mean, this shit has to stop. And we really have to step back and realize that underneath all this bullshit and this tension that's been building in society, there's a lot of good people. And a lot of good people who will always be good people, regardless of the circumstances. And I'd like to consider myself one of them. I think a first step towards acknowledging that is when people finally admit that, the government don't care about you at all. I mean, that's just a fact. The people who we elect into office, if you want to call it that, they don't have the people's interest at heart. They're looking forward 4 years to see that they can get voted for again. And even the best intentions in history, end up with gulags and millions of people dying for unnecessary reasons. I don't want to get into the dark shit. I have one more topic before but I'm going to see if anybody else has joined and say hello to anyone else. Hello, Sprocaster. Good to see you. Hey, Daniel Riley, my friend. Good to see you. Daniel Riley's been a sub of mine for a long time. And what do we got? Huxley called it the thin veil of consciousness. Yep. Good to see you, Alum. Smoking Mantis says, I've heard that the mark of true intelligence is the ability to take in new information and reform your ideas. I would say that that's a form of intelligence for sure. I guess they say 10 or 12 different forms of intelligence. When we talk about intelligence, often people think about intellect as far as, the things and how you carry yourself. But there's Some of the most intelligent mathematicians have no emotional intelligence, for example. Some people can't interact with other groups very well. And I think the ultimate intelligence is to have a nice balance of all of them. Ultimately, we know when we're doing well and when we need to improve part of our personality. I mean, if you're getting in trouble all the time, if you got an anger problem, you got to work on that, right? If you're always pitying yourself and people don't want to spend time with you because you're too whiny, then you work on that. If you're overbearing and arrogant and narcissistic, then people will, of course, avoid you, and you got to work on that. But ultimately, there's a lot to be said about perspective of how we view each other. And there are some times when you'll have somebody that you meet or somebody in your life who thinks you're a certain way or believes that you think a certain way, and nothing you say can change their mind. And arguing is completely pointless. Completely pointless with people who are narcissists. Thoughts on John Lilly's? No, I'm familiar with him, but it's been a while. I couldn't. Yeah, I couldn't remember exactly what he talked about, but I am familiar with them. Rules to logic. Rules to logic. Nice. Daily dose of mental says, "What's up, Carpo? It's good to see you, my friend." Yeah, right on. 36 ideas. All right, I think I've caught up with everyone. Eric says, "It seems like in my short studies, history has the tendency to repeat and repeat. It does, and it does. And it does it every few centuries, every century, then every few decades, then every decade, every few years, then every year, every few months. Think about the meme cycle, which I have call it now. The meme cycle in the news, the meme cycle online of generally, this is what's important right now. Look, 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 this is the flashy thing for today, and then it's something else, then it's something else." And I joked around like a few weeks ago about starting a series called, Flavor of the Week, where I would just lay out two things that were popular this week. That week it was hot air balloons and whatever, something else. I can't remember now. See, that's the thing. But every week there's some new celebrity that did something or something else to distract us. If you look at what's going on with like the politics right now within our cultures in our society, how the race relations and the gender thing is being so just played out by the media and the government catering to this shit. It makes you wonder why, and you think, oh, of course, get people angry at each other, distracted with each other, and then the real monsters can continue to just traipse over all of us, dominate our financial markets. BlackRock can buy all the houses out from under people, more consolidated wealth. We printed half the money in this country over the last year. Half of the money's been printed in the last 12 months, or at least 40 something percent. We're heading into inflation for, I have no idea why. And I don't know how I got on that little tantrum, but when you said that history repeats, it does. In 2008, when the market crashed, it was a travesty, and it's not even talked about really at all. There's no apology from the government, of course. No, we're just going to bail out Wall Street. That's when I lost faith completely. That's when Obama, to me, was like, wow. Wow. So much for hope, right? No, bailing out the banks, trillions of dollars, not to the people that could use it, but to the banks to save them so they could bail out their, CEOs with, $2 million bonuses. And it's just disgusting. And I'm not going to get into that, the negativity about it because, yeah, there's a lot of fucked up shit out there right now. And it's hard to navigate because you want to be positive. But you see these things repeating, things that have repeated in my life. And then you hear the same thing from the older generations. This is why it's important we listen to our elders. I know that sounds fucking cringe as hell, but the okay boomer thing, I get it. There are a lot of old folks who are very stuck in their ways. But look, me as a 47-year-old man, I've changed my opinions on a lot of things over my life, and I imagine I will continue to do so. So you've got to give people credit to imagine that just because somebody's old doesn't mean that they're just totally dim-witted and have just stuck to their guns their whole life. Sure, we like consistency, we like routine, but there are some very intelligent people out there who will warn us, hey, you're repeating a pattern that we've already seen in the 60s or even in the 20s, you know. I guess it's the 20s again. It's just, it's fucked up because we want to think we're being progressive right now in society, and we're not. We're regressing severely. And saying that just hurts people's feelings because people really think they're doing the right thing. There's a right and a wrong way to do things, and I don't know what it is. So, oh, hello, Anon. Good to see you. And Skrilla Scro. It's good to see you guys. 12 years. Yeah, 10 minutes ago. Daniel woke up 10 minutes ago, huh? He says, Russell Brand on Joe Rogan. Yeah, I watched a clip from it. I'll be honest, I was watching Russell Brand about a year ago, and I completely unsubscribed from his, channel about, I don't know, 6 months ago. I couldn't stand it anymore. I couldn't stand his ranting lunatic voice. And I love the guy, don't get me wrong. But my God, he was really buying into the whole, quote, red pill thing. I mean, I've seen people go off the deep end. They're like, oh my God, I just became aware of all this stuff and I'm just going to slam it down your throat and scream it at you. But he's a very intelligent guy and he has a lot to say. So it's definitely worth listening to it once in a while. And I think Joe Rogan is a great format because it's long format. So, hello, Sandra. All those stupid loans. Yep, that's right. So, the next thing I wanted to talk about was planned obsolescence, which fits in with how our society is in decline. This is another topic I made a video for, but if you look at old architecture, old buildings that are still standing, the quality of craftsmanship. As a carpenter, old tools. I was going through my old hand planes earlier, and the old ones are phenomenal. They'll last for years, decades. Obviously, they're still around. You go out and buy one these days, a hand tool, and it is expected to last maybe a year. And, everything falls apart and we become accepting of it. Appliances, stereos, televisions, cars, phones. But it's bad enough that things are made from bad products or products are made from bad materials, but it is planned obsolescence that is the problem. This is where companies literally make a weakest link, for example. Maybe you just put one crappy gear in a gearbox to make sure that it's going to go out at a certain time. It may seem like, oh, that's a conspiracy theory. No, that's actually fact. They do this. We know that they plan certain things to fall apart. In the software world, it's called upgrades. Upgrade to Windows 11. By the way, no support for that anymore. Even though you bought that product, now you have to buy a new one. So, but everything seems to be kind of falling apart. And I have old appliances. I have an old, I got an old dishwasher, old washing machine, old dryer. My old TV that I got secondhand 20 years ago still works. I've had a few since then, but that old one's just still sitting here for backup. I've got a bunch of old vintage stereos and stuff like that. And the quality, I feel the quality of stuff has gone downhill. We know this, but that's just the allegory for the bigger picture here, which is that we have gone downhill. Are we planning our own obsolescence? It seems like new ideas are just boring and people want to stick to what they know, but the new ideas that do get pushed through are just dumb as hell. It's like there's a reason why we always go back to old philosophies and archetypes. And that reason is because they work. They're timeless. And that's what I mean about remembering the past. We used to build things to endure. We built them for beauty, sure, but we built them quality. And I think we should do the same things with our own lives. because I feel like a lot of us are living our lives as if we're planning obsolescence in our own lives. So for me, I may not have everything that I want right now in life. I may not have attained the person I want to be yet. Maybe I'm still working towards that. But a shortcut would be to just say, screw it. I don't care. I'm good enough and this is where I want to be. I feel like that's what we've done as a society with all the crap that we buy. We're just like content with it. Oh, well, it's cheaper. I'll buy it for half what I would pay, and I can just buy a new one when it goes bad. It's not about the garbage or the waste or the environment. It's just about this mindset that we have that everything's disposable. And now that's starting to rub off, and people are starting to see each other that way. And, you know, the children are watching, my friends. The children are watching. That may sound a little, you know, you hear that, hey, it's about the kids, but it's really about the fucking kids. It really is. Just because our generation's fucked up in our own way doesn't mean that the next generation can't pick up the pieces. We have access to so much technology and the ability to do so much. Right now, if we had a completely different mindset as a whole and different people in charge, could we do a lot better? Would we be living in a sustainable world? you know, would we be putting our money towards building rather than, you know, having American facilities turn over to missile production like they're doing right now so they can make bombs to send overseas? That's what's happening in the US. We're still making bombs to send to other countries. It's disgusting. It's just disgusting. Now, bombs, now that's the ultimate planned obsolescence once it goes off. But, we're questioning what is normal right now. And that's scary. Because when you start questioning what's normal, and people say normal is what you want it to be, that's something that 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I would have said, that's the way we need to do things. Change it all up, shake everything up. But humans, I've realized, can't cope with that. And I've noticed this because all of the access we have to information and technology and data, people don't want it. I can't imagine how many discussions I've had with people over the last couple of years where they had no interest in information or data or facts. I could even send a scientific article to them and they would say something like, oh, whatever, you're just biased. And that's nothing on anyone in particular. That's the human condition. We don't want to be wrong. We don't want to admit that what we think might be right is wrong. And with COVID, I really threw that one into into overdrive, right? I mean, we've got people screaming at each other about whether they have a little diaper over their face. It was pretty wild for a while, but it showed us a side of people that under intense pressure and fear for the future, people aren't quite so kind to each other. It's kind of scary. So as I said, or maybe I hadn't laid out that point yet, when I heard they laid it out like this. They said, when times are good, we help others. But when times are rough, we help ourselves. Yeah. Saw somebody say, feels like a divide and conquer situation. Yeah, well, we do that to ourselves, don't we? I mean, hello, Nate. Good to see you, my friend. Nate Monkey. So, what I've learned through my studies of many different things is to keep shit simple. I have this rock sitting over here. It says thank you. It's carved into the rock. It's just one of those little $2, $3 rocks, whatever, that you might get at some corner store, right? I don't know where it was bought, but it was sent to me in the mail, along with some seeds. I think Teresa. Man, I've been trying to remember the name of the person that sent this, and it came up as Teresa. I think it was Teresa Cowan. I could be wrong, but this was like 10 years ago. And she sent me this along with some seeds for my garden. Now I grow heirloom vegetables, and I have several seeds, and I'll harvest my own seeds at the end of the year. And so I started like a seed exchange on YouTube and was trying to send out some of my tobacco seeds and whatnot. And so she sent me that little package with that stone. And the funny thing is that years later, I still got this. And every time I see it, I put it in my pocket to give to someone else. Somebody who makes that I want to thank. And I haven't found anybody worth thanking, but no. No, I just, a little thing like that can mean so much to you. Eric said like a worry stone. I remember those. Man, wow, back in the like 90s. Yeah, worry stones they kind of had a resurgence around the time of the pet rock. But yeah, it's what it means that somebody says thank you. And I always think about that. I have a whole box of like Grateful Dead dancing bears and a few other things. Subscribers have sent me some pretty cool shit in the past. That's not what this is about. It's more about the small things. Just like that people care enough to do something for other people. Something small. We need more of that. And I think we've kind of lost that direct connection since the internet's allowed people to act a fool in front of each other without having to actually see each other. You know what I mean? It's all complicated shit. Like, somebody asked if I have any thoughts on Carl Jung. No, I actually don't, really. He's got some great, just, him, Jung had some amazing ideas, and there's nothing that I could really relay here. I haven't delved in that deep. Let's put it this way. I got into philosophy, studied all the different philosophers, decided I don't care who had which philosophy. Like, I know all the names, I've studied them, Descartes, and I'll get him mixed up with some other philosopher, right? Like Spinoza, and be like, wait a minute, oh wait, was that a philosopher, or was that, it just doesn't matter. The thing that I've realized is to study philosophies, not philosophers, and never give a damn about attributing it to a specific person, because ultimately philosophy is just love of wisdom, and that wisdom is always carried from previous philosophers and passed down. So I've never really reveled or romanticized any specific philosophers. I think that a lot of them are boring as hell. Carl Jung was a very interesting fellow, for sure. I think what's funny to me is when people debate philosophy, because philosophy, or the fact that it's a class in college, like you're studying other philosophers, but really, we're all philosophers. I mean, most of us. It's a love of knowledge, a love of wisdom, and a huge segment of society is, loves wisdom. It doesn't matter how much you seek out, or whether you sit with a pipe and read a lot of books, that kind of old version of the philosopher. But I see the philosopher's stone as that thing that you grasp when you realize you already have what you need. And I don't dare tell you that I've found that stone and that I've found my truth. But I have. And I've realized that part of that truth is that you're never done. You have this epiphany at some point in your search that there is no goal, that there is no end. It's the Ouroboros. It's the snake eating its tail. Philosophy is just about learning so you can lead a more comfortable life by knowing how to avoid problems. If philosophy leads us to more worry or leads us to more concern, that's where we get to the term or the saying, ignorance is bliss. And in a sense, I understand that more than I ever did before. Sometimes you just don't want to know. You don't need to know everything. And sometimes it's better to wonder. I feel like this is often why there's a huge debate, or, a major rift between science and religion a lot of the time. It shouldn't be that way. Science, so many of the early Christians were, they were scientists. They studied these things because they were using the scientific method to study nature so they could better understand God. But then, all of a sudden, these discoveries started telling people things that went against what they believed God was. No, well, that's not possible. God did it this way. Oh, no, the Earth's at the center of the universe. If you think of how ignorant we've been through history, and then you think of, oh, okay, fine, the Earth's not at the center of the universe, and how one day we're going to have to admit that it's not that religion's right or wrong, or atheism, or anything in between, but rather we are living in God right now. This is it. It doesn't have to be. Evolution is happening right now. Creation is continually happening. It's just we talk about 6 days or 7 days of creation because that little feeble minds that, well, it must have been done on human terms, but everything is unfolding like a flower. You think about it, a rose is beautiful before it opens up. Once it does open up, it's, even more beautiful. But then it dies. But then another rose comes up. The truth about the truth that I've discovered through philosophy and my study of the occult is that everything worthy is simple. Everything worth knowing is simple. All the ideas worth conveying are simple. And all of the methods of living your life are simple. We are the ones that complicate it. And usually that doesn't bring us any closer to, I don't want to say happiness, because that's a fleeting emotion, but happiness is only defined by times when we weren't happy. Otherwise, we'd have no way to gauge it. Oh, or as Eric said, I thought God is us. Exactly. Yeah, and there's kind of this repeating pattern that you find through all of the philosophers, all the stories, all the Bibles and books, and you find that the problem often is from stigma and dogma. You think of the stigma against drug addiction and how now there's a stigma against talking bad about drug addiction. I don't know, I can't really get into that one. It's a long one, but in other words, there was a time when people were held accountable for the things they did. And if you got yourself into trouble and if you became a drunk or a doper, then you were called out by society. You were ridiculed. You were looked down on. Then we realized that wasn't solving the problem. So we began to try to help people, get them support, and say, you can do it, you can do it. But then people would continue to fail. And it's kind of like, at some point, it's tough love. I use that as an example for everything that we've tried as humans. We try certain things and we think we have the right method, and then we find out that's just not working, and we've got to back up a minute and be a little bit rough around the edges. This is why you'll never hear me say love and light. Why? But if you watch one of my videos from like 8-10 years ago, there's definitely a few in there where I said that, and I think, wow, how cringe. Love and light. Well, where did I hear that? Oh, from these new age, spiritual people. Well, what were they saying? Oh, well, that everything's about positivity. I remember driving in my car and literally focusing on putting out positive vibes to the world and not having any negative thoughts. I mean, these are good things. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to do that. But the idea was that you should never have negative thoughts. That lasted about 2 days. It just doesn't work because it's not reality. So I processed things differently, and I thought maybe. And that was probably around the time when I read The Secret. Thank you, Oprah. The Secret, if any of you know what that is, that book, which is about manifesting your destiny, is pretty much hogwash. And so for me to look back and say that kind of inspired me, I was thinking it's not that I believed it, I was just curious. I was like, well, if I do put out this good energy, maybe I will get what I want. Maybe if I do write down all my thoughts on a memory board and I look at it every day and say, this is what I want, this is what I want, I will manifest my reality. And next thing you know, I'll have all the things that I want. And when I started trying to think of things to put on it, I couldn't think. Because I don't want anything. I mean, I'd love to have a farmhouse. That's my dream. A farmhouse on some acreage to get the hell out of the city. But beyond that, I have my family, my friends. I don't know what else I would ever want. And that got me thinking about all the things that people ask the universe for and how people are really just incomplete and unhappy in themselves. And we need to help each other to overcome that. We need to see the goodness in each other. Try to. Sometimes it's hard. Some people are assholes. You know what I mean? I'm going to flip through the comments. Not everyone is a bad place at the same others. Yep. Yeah, Sandra, you're right. People roll in different loops. And the loops is that's a great example. I call it, I guess, yeah. I was trying to think of the word I use for it. Cycles, I guess, but same thing. I go through various cycles. And with mental health, you'll find that there are cycles like within the day. I guess you could get even down to the hour sometimes, but there's cycles within the day. No matter how hard I try, I don't really feel motivated and inspired till the evening. Can't help it. I still go to work in the day and I still get shit done, but the evening is where my thoughts really start to come in. My whole life, it's just been that way. Those are my cycles, and that's my clock. And then there's cycles within each week, for example, usually because of the work week, because that's a man-made cycle, the week. But the day is not a man-made cycle. We're affected by the sun, by the moon, by everything. Then we get into the yearly cycles, and right now is like the winter of discontent, right? I'm ready for summer, okay? We just got this huge snowstorm last week, and it was a surprise snowstorm. Like they said we might get traced to a half inch. We got a foot of snow at the Portland airport, which is right across the river. And I like snow personally. It wasn't a problem, but the winter is a time where we get locked indoors and we think about things. And I always think of the winter as processing time, where I start to, do my thinking, I guess. And then in the summer, that's when I feel like going out and doing stuff. And yeah, we're all in different cycles at different times. Now you think about how weather is different in different parts of climate. You've got people in California that are out there in 80-degree weather while people up north are freezing their asses off, and they're both talking online, and the weather's affecting people differently. One person's in a good mood, the other person's not, and not just because of the weather, but circumstance. We're more interconnected than we've ever been, and I know what you're saying about the loops, because we're all at different things at different times. It sucks like when you're feeling really good and you want to share laughter with somebody and they're just in a shitty mood. You're like, fuck you. But that's how it is, man.